My name is Barry Casey. I am the Interim Director of the Faculty Development Center, just one floor up and over on that side. I've been here just over a year, and my background is in teaching, philosophy, and communications. And I've also done quite a bit of design work back in the 80s, right after the Mac first came out. I had my own design firm, and I feels like I beta tested all the page design software. But I've had a lot of fun with design over the years. It's just kind of an interest of mine, especially as it relates to teaching and so forth. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So Paul, if we're up, we're just going to go ahead and get started. Information comes to us in bits and bytes and chunks. It's coming to us all the time. And we have to do something meaningful with it. We've got to make something out of it, because information by itself isn't enough. People really want meaning. And so those of us who are in the meaning business, and that's pretty much all of us who communicate, really need to take that information and those slices of information, put them together, take some kind of meaning out of it. People are really hungry to hear a story. They want the whole orange, not the enchilada. We'll stick with the orange today. Welcome to Creating Clarity. Clarity is a kind of theme of mine because I so rarely get it, and I want it so much. And so I think this is something that is worth putting time into. Today we're going to look at three things: basic design principles, building a visual presentation, and how to create effective slides. We'll also look at communicating with numbers and dealing with noise on the slide. Second semester, I'm going to be producing a show on quantitative information and how we communicate that. I'll have a little bit on that today, but I can't really go into it in as much detail. So, we learn better from words and pictures together than words or pictures alone. We process the visual and the textual in two different places in our brain, and so they're not competing with each other. They're really complementing each other. It gives us two ways to store and two ways to retrieve. It seems that we're really hardwired for understanding images. It works quicker, faster, more efficient. We retain those images longer than we do text. And so, for some people, the image gives rise to thought. Paul Ricoeur, philosopher. For other people who are perhaps not so visually oriented, the thought gives rise to the image. Just think about the difference between those things and the way you think. If you think from thoughts to image or from image to thought. In any case, the goal is to go from the idea to the story. So, what's your story? And all of us have a story. And anytime you're trying to solve a problem, which is basically what communication is about, we have a story in kind of underlying it. We need to lift that up. So what's your story? Well, we're going to look at three things here, 3 steps to designing a presentation. The first one is imagining the story, and that can include brainstorming in a group or by yourself, building the presentation, researching the information, and constructing an outline, also known as a storyboard, and then finally designing your slides, bringing together text and images on the slide itself. But a couple of facts before we get into that. One is that we perceive selectively, and you know this to be the case. Sometimes if you have had something at the peripheral edge of your vision and then you notice it, now you cannot not ignore it. It's right there. There's a great book out called Rapt, R-A-P-T, about attention. It's by Winifred Gallagher, and she spent about 3 years researching this. After she got cancer, that really snapped her attention and her focus. And she began to research all about attention. Attention is probably one of the least understood but most important things about communication. And certainly when it comes to advertising, one of the first things is to grab people's attention. But we perceive selectively, and what we notice right away is contrast. And we'll come back to that and talk a little more about that. Another thing is pattern recognition. We look for patterns. We're comfortable with patterns. We look for information to be displayed in certain predictable kinds of patterns, paragraphs, outline form, steps, a sequence, a process, something like that. We're always looking for a pattern, and if we don't find one, we'll create one. So we'll keep that in mind. Now, what I want you to do is to go back here. Try something here. I'm going to give you 3 seconds, and I'd like you to look at the slide that's coming up here for 3 seconds, and then write down, draw down from memory as many of the shapes as you can. Okay? You ready? Okay. How did you do? Give you a moment to put those down. First of all, how many different kinds of shapes were there? If you got 5, raise your hand. Okay, 4, right, 3, okay, 2, 1. You got to get 1 anyway. Okay, now I'll give you the next slide. Again, 5 seconds. Ready? Okay, how was that? A lot better, wasn't it? Yeah. And the reason was because we created a pattern, right? Everything's the same number of images on the screen. It's just that we put it in an arrangement that people can grasp a lot faster and more efficiently. This is called chunking in a way. We usually associate chunking with text, but you can do it with images too, and it's kind of a part of the graphic phenomenon. It can help us to learn. We attempt to find patterns here, and if there isn't an apparent one, we'll create one, but here there was one. Okay, so selective perception then, and pattern recognition. So with those things in mind, we'll get into the process of building a presentation. The first thing is to really let your imagination go. You can try brainstorming, try association, dig down into your memory, into the metaphors that you think of and understand. Gather the ideas, massage them, just play around with them. Sometimes it's not easy to kind of let ourselves go in that way, but this is where some of our most creative ideas come from. Salvador Dali used to lie down in the early afternoon in the heat and take a nap. And he would hold a spoon in his fingers and let his arm drape off the divan where he was lying. And you know that state between wakefulness and sleep where you begin to associate things and it's some really weird stuff comes together? Well, that's also the time when your muscles begin to relax. And so when his muscles would relax, the spoon would drop and hit the floor. He'd sit up, grasp the images that had come to his mind in that weird state, and go off to paint them. That was one way that he got some of the images that we see in his canvases. I think he also used some drugs in some cases. But if you would rather not go that route, you can try the Dali state, you know, and it often helps quite well. You can think about it on your commute. I do this a lot. I drive 40 minutes up here, and it gives me a good chance to kind of debrief at the end of the day and as I'm coming up to think about the day and come up with ideas. Get out by yourself. If you're working on a presentation for your work, your department, just go walk about across the campus and just let your mind ruminate on those things. But get by yourself. You need that kind of time. Let your imagination go free, take flight. Go deep down inside and work from the inside out. The things, the associations that mean the most to you, kind of unwind and bring them up to the surface. And then find the essential story deep inside. This is not as mysterious or as New Age as it might sound. But the stories are there. We just don't often let them come up, and we don't articulate them enough. We come at it from a much more structured point of view. Really, like Alan Kay says, most ideas you can do pretty darn well with a stick in the sand. You know, we can do these things pretty simply, fairly low tech. We don't need a lot of things like that. We've already got what we need in our heads. Then sit down, begin to research, pull ideas together, think about the goals that you want to communicate. Work from that central idea. That's kind of your mission statement, and everything loops back to that. What is it that you really want to get across? What do you want your folks to walk out of with and remember, you know, in 10 minutes, in 10 days, maybe even in 10 months? So work towards your goal and get some coffee. One way to work at this stage is with sticky notes or Post-it notes. And these things have some real advantages. They're bright, they're small, you can move them around. You get one idea on a sticky note and you just plaster them up and you can kind of create an outline right there on your wall. This is my office. And way back in the day when I was first working on this, I was just brainstorming and thinking of ideas, put them up on the wall and just shuffled them all around. It's a pretty effective and efficient way to begin to collect your thoughts in some kind of order, some sort of pattern. It's recommended by two people whose works I am using a lot, Gar Reynolds' presentation Zen, and this will be at the end of the outline too, so you don't need to take the note right now, and Nancy Duarte, Slideology. Nancy Duarte's company is the one who worked with Al Gore on Inconvenient Truth, which is really just a slideshow, you know, PowerPoint presentation. And let me say something about PowerPoint and Keynote, which I am using right now, Keynote from Apple. Edward Tufte, who wrote really a classic on the visual display of quantitative information, he's also rather famous for saying PowerPoint is evil. And other people have said PowerPoint makes you stupid, and it makes those who look at your presentation stupid. Well, I don't think so. The problem with these presentation software packages is that it just makes us lazy. Not stupid. It's not evil. It just makes us lazy. Because they give us templates that we can just pour information in. And we don't have to think about the design. They've already done that for us. But the design is usually pretty awful, you know. And so what I do is just start with a blank canvas. And you can do that in either PowerPoint or Keynote. They have a blank slide. And you just start with that. And you start putting text in and pictures, images as you wish. So just create it yourself. You can do that. That's part of what I'm trying to get across here, is that we needn't be afraid of using software if we keep some design principles in mind. So one thing that's so nice about this is that it's also tactile. You can move your ideas around. You can touch them, you know. Then you can go to PowerPoint or Keynote and begin to work on the slides. Now, as you get more easy with this kind of method, you can probably go directly to PowerPoint or Keynote and begin to work in the slides right there. And I found that this is something I can do, although I still go back and do the sticky note thing too. There's where you begin to draw together your ideas, the words and the images, and this leads us then to the third stage, designing the slides. Now, in any visual communication, there are really three things. There's the message, there's the delivery, and there's the form. And we're talking about the form today, slides on the screen. So we'll begin with two general principles of design. First one is simplicity. And I can't emphasize this enough. If you've ever died by PowerPoint, it was because there was just too much on the screen for the most part. It's overwhelming, and it's boring. The mind shuts down. So what we're trying for is simplicity. That's good in design, it's good in teaching and learning, and it's good in life. We process images more directly and more efficiently than we do text. We take text in a hierarchical fashion, and we're constantly interpreting and reinterpreting as we're listening and reading. But with images, we take it directly in, and we process it very quickly. So what we're trying for here is less is more when we combine text and images. We want clarity and grace and balance. Those are the things that we're trying for as we try to exemplify simplicity. One aspect of simplicity is this signal-to-noise ratio. Communications term, what we want is high signal, low noise. Noise is anything that disrupts the communication, that gets in the way of a clear signal. So the less noise, the more signal. That's our goal. So we try to cut down on the non-essentials, like on the templates that we see in PowerPoint. There are often things in the background that distract from the information that we want to get across. Now, I'm going to give you an example here of signal to noise, and I deliberately chose one that was rather difficult to see what we could do with it. This is a picture that is in black and white, and there are spots of color, as you can see. But I've also lightened the temperature, if you like, of this thing, made it more yellowish. Now, where would you say some noise comes in on this slide here? Steve?
Bright spots.
Bright spots, yeah, and the glasses. So these kinds of things. And we can adjust that, you know, we can take care of some of that. Any other places that are distractions? What's that? Yeah. Okay. And then right here we lose something against the yellow strap there, don't we? Now here's another attempt. And so what I did was to reduce the opacity down to 40%. And again, that's easy to do in these programs. I just kind of lowered everything down, you know, and increased the size of the text. It's still not ideal, but it's better than it was. So that's a way of reducing the distractors, reducing the noise, and trying to up the signal there. Now here's a scary slide. Typical death by PowerPoint. This is from a class and that I did some years ago, and I just poured this in about 10 minutes before class, to my shame, and put it up there. So what are some of the things that distract us? What's the noise here? What's that? The bridge, yeah. We're trying to figure out, what does it have to do with Plato's forms, you know, but that's a template in PowerPoint. Nice picture of Golden Gate Bridge, but what does it mean? You know, nothing that we can identify, and why should we have to think about it? And then also the date and the footer, you know, this shows up down there, and if you don't know how to get rid of it, you're stuck with it. And then we've got all these bullets, and bullets kill, you know. We've got to read it. We've got to figure out what we're supposed to do with that kind of stuff. So this is not helpful. Here's another one. Yikes. It screams at us. The colors, the grid, how important is that? You know, everything's kind of overlapping and all of this. And it doesn't really tell us much of anything. Okay, here's a little better one. Boy, this one's fancy. It's really cool, isn't it? You got these round tubes. There's shadows and reflections, and it's 3D, and you've got a grid, and you've got that legend all the way across the top there. Isn't that cool? Yeah? All right, how can we improve this? All right, let's try it. Okay, first thing is we can make that headline jump out a little bit, you know. Now, I'll let you in on something here. The headline was originally red, but when I played it down here, I saw that red kind of faded out with the lights that we've got, so I went back and changed it to that kind of orangey color. These are standard colors. You can kind of get a set, a package that goes nicely together, and so I just ran it, and I increased the size of the percentages, the numbers there, and it looks better, don't you think? But there's still something wrong with this. What's wrong with this? Yeah, Australia is the bottom. Now, Wes, you said that. What does that imply?
That it's the worst.
And if we're thinking about alphabetical, it's nowhere near that. You know, we're looking for patterns too. And so we've got the United States at the top, Australia at the bottom, and it's all kind of mixed up. We don't really get it, you know. We're looking at the numbers, but even they don't have a pattern either that we can discern. So in some respects it's better, in other respects it's almost worse, you know. So let's see if we can do a little better here. Now we want to highlight the low obesity rates of Japan. By the way, these are not real numbers, but they're pretty close. It's what I could remember from an article. But the numbers are not really the point here. We want to emphasize Japan, so why not pop it out and just kind of gray the others back while we still have them. Now we have an order. It's descending from greatest to least, but in this case the least is the best, you know. So it's a little better. And that's one way that we can cut down on the noise and increase the signal. And you can probably think of ways that you could do that even better. One way, if you wanted to concentrate just, you know, having shown this, if you wanted to come back then and say, let's talk about Japan and why they have such low obesity rates, you could just have that number, Japan and 15% on the screen, and just talk about why they've got it. And that would be reminding people all the time. Now here's something else. Just got this out of Harper's. At the front of Harper's every month, they have this index of strange facts. And this one's really odd. The number of states banning texting while driving. What would you guess?
Less than 10.
Less than 10? Another guess?
40.
40? Okay. It's 27. Number of these states that provide traffic updates on Twitter. 25. What? So that's a bit odd. So simplicity and signal to noise ratio is part of that. So then the second major principle of design then is empty space. Now sometimes we see empty space, we just want to fill it with text, but resist that impulse. Empty space is not nothing. It is a something. Think of this as kind of your own creative canvas for meaning. And the way we use empty space is is a positive. It gives it elegance, it gives it emphasis, it in fact creates meaning. Here are some examples. A lot of white space there. Now, in any presentation, there are three things: slides, notes, and handouts. The notes are there for you. I'm looking at them right now. The handouts are for your audience, and you can either hand them out at the end, or you can use them as you are right now. So with these ideas of simplicity and empty space in mind, now we can go on to talk about designing effective slides. And I'm going to give you 5 elements here that are essential. These are not the only ones, but in the interest of time, I cut it down to 5. Most designers think about 7, sometimes 8. But these are ones that we can immediately work with. First one is contrast. Contrast simply means difference. We notice the differences right away, even the smallest ones. And contrast is one of the most powerful elements because we can use it in so many different ways. You can make contrast out of so many different things. And I'll give you some examples. One is size. Another is shape. Contrast through shape. Shade. Color contrasts. And then proximity. And we'll talk more about proximity in a few moments. So contrast is a quick and effective way to make points on your slide and to communicate effectively. We'll go back to, well, another example here. What have I done here? What contrasts have I drawn here? Think about color, size, shade, so forth.
Different fonts?
Yes, different fonts. Actually, they're all in the same family, but they're different parts of that family, and you try to keep those families together. But size and then shade. One thing about fonts is that you can actually deal with shading by using a light font versus a heavy font up there. It's all in the same family, they're all the same color, but they just have different shading because of the mass involved there. Here's another example. Yikes. Okay, sorry, I'm going to have to, oh, there we go. Okay. Example of color. And notice also that there's quite a bit of air between these lines. Makes it easier to read on the screen. Okay, here's one. Again, I worked with the opacity of the slide behind and screened it back and brought that out there. Okay, let's see if we can keep going here. A second element is alignment. Connecting elements on a slide. Nothing should look like it was dropped in or just placed there randomly. We try to make connections, and we quickly see things that are out of line. One way to do that is to work with a grid system, and a 3-column grid is one of the most common. It's also one of the easiest to use. You can also use a 4 or 5-column thing. I'll show you some examples of how adaptable this is. This is something that's used in photography a lot, and it's also used in designing publications. And when I had a publication business, I would use a 3-column grid on newsletters very often because you can fill up 2 columns and then have a sidebar and so forth. So it really makes it easy to balance things, and that's what we're trying to do, is to balance. Nancy Duarte talks about a grid system that provides us a flexible way to organize the content. So we've got text and images. Another example there, the rule of thirds. Again, what we're trying to do here is to create some asymmetry, a little off-center, so that there's movement on the slide. It's not static. You could center everything, but then while it looks very neat, it doesn't move, if you like. And so the rule of thirds and the grid allows us to develop a flow to the slide and a balance that is sometimes quite pleasing. Another example. The figure dominates here, and that's the way the slide, I received the slide, and then I worked with the text to fill in where I wanted. And again, I wanted a kind of flow from the top of her hand all the way down. And in a moment we're going to talk about flow, but you can kind of see a triangle here. And that's another sort of hidden structure that is pleasing to the eye, even though we're not really conscious of it. But we'll see that a lot. If you go to an art gallery and look at paintings, very often you'll see those kinds of patterns developing of triangles and so forth. It's one of the ones that we use a lot. Here's another example of that triangle. We look from the leaper up to the text and that draws our eye with the red backslash, and then down to the text here. And the grid gives us a chance to play around. You can move those things around until you find a balance that is pleasing to you and that makes sense. And one more. Here we've used a 2-column for the image and then the 3rd column for the text. And the young man, my son, is looking toward the text here. We'll talk about that in a moment. Also directs our attention up. I mean, we'd look there anyway, but that's just another cue to get us there. And then we just read down. And when you've got another column for the text, you can play around with the spacing and with the break between the words where you want it, so that you can actually emphasize some words and some lines more than others. Okay, so now we'll go to flow. And flow is about arranging the information on a slide in the order that you want it to be processed by the viewer. In the West, we generally read from top to bottom and left to right, but you can direct the eye in this kind of Z pattern really as you wish, depending how you place the elements on the slide. So we usually read in this way, and it looks like that. Now, let's say that you want to break out of that pattern, and you want people to see it. You don't want to call attention to it, but you want them to follow a pattern that is not the same as the usual. How do you go about doing that? Well, you keep in mind our selective perception, that we're looking for patterns, and we can change it up. We can reverse the usual flow, beginning down here, going up, and then ending up in the opposite place if we plan it out. And so we pull the attention down to the bottom here, and that pulls us up like that. And we could have something up in that top left corner. It would need to be smaller and not quite as intrusive as what we've got. We don't usually do this kind of thing because it runs against the flow, literally, you know. But sometimes it's good to kind of break the rules. Another thing about flow that you'll see quite often, and now that you know about it or are reminded of it, you'll begin to see it all over the place. And that is generally when we have faces on a screen, we keep them pointing in toward the text. Now I reversed that on the previous slide with my son, but here we want to intensify the focus on the text itself. Are you 2 paychecks away from the street? And this man's distinctive face pulls us right in. He's looking at us, but our eyes are drawn over there. But again, if you know the rules, then you can break them. As long as you know what you're doing and you've got a purpose in mind, this breaks the rules, right? Man's angling out of the frame, walking away from the text. We'd expect to see it looking like this, heading in, know your audience. But if we have him, if we go ahead and do it this way, it suggests a kind of subtle text underneath. If you know your audience, you know that you have to persuade them and capture them in a sense. They're walking away, you've got to bring them back or hold them in some way. Probably not good to mess with that too much, but now and then it's a good thing. Okay, now we'll go to the last two elements, proximity. Proximity says that we group objects together so they'll be perceived as a group and not as unrelated elements. And hierarchy, which we're going to deal with together with proximity, talks about the relationships between those elements. So we're going to combine these to show how that would work in designing a slide. Hierarchy, as I've said, defines the relationship between the elements. Proximity pulls them together. Hierarchy defines how they get along. An example might be parents and children. Every element in a hierarchy is the child of the element above it or the parent of the one below it. And so we can look at some of these things. Here the parent dominates. So you bring a powerful central image in and you can arrange the other elements around it. Here's an example of where all the elements are equal. And so there, you know, you want to be careful, play around with it, but not to overdo it because we don't really know where to look. We're always looking for patterns and hierarchy, you know. Another example of varying elements, something that will catch our eye, that has to do with flow too. Now I'll give you an example of how we might create a title slide that uses those elements of proximity and hierarchy in ways that are more attractive and more effective. Here you have 4 basic elements, and it's hard to distinguish between them. They're all of equal weight, and none really stands out over the others. Where do you look? And so you kind of scan them over, and it doesn't really catch your eye. So let's see if we can improve on this. Here's one example, a little improvement. Now we've got 3, 2 text blocks, and then a logo down at the bottom in color. What we've done here is to bring out by means of shading and size the elements that we think are more important than some of the other lines. Now we've pulled it over to the right, so we've got some asymmetry there, which is a little unusual and it catches the eye. We've continued to work with highlighting certain elements here. Now we're highlighting clarity. We've grayed back the creating and intensified the clarity. And here's the final iteration of it. We've got a deep, dark background, and the letters pop out. And then what we also have is that triangle, this time turned upside down, reading from top down to the exit where the logo is, and so it pulls us gently right down to the exit. So, kind of quick review then of some of these principles: simplicity, empty space, contrast, alignment, flow, proximity, and hierarchy. They're really fairly simple. I want to acknowledge these folks. As I've said, Nancy Duarte's book, Slideology, Gar Reynolds' presentation, Zen. Gar Reynolds has a website, as does Nancy Duarte. Gar Reynolds is called Presentation Zen, and he gives some wonderful tips. He also puts out a blog that will connect you to all other kinds of resources. What he put me onto, and I'll show you this in just a moment, is where to get good slides. Edward Tufte, Visual Display of Quantitative Information. And then someone that I just discovered a few weeks ago, Stephen Few. Now you see it, Simple Visualization Techniques for Quantitative Analysis. It's a chunk of a book, but it's beautifully put together. And he's not just talking about how to display it, but how to understand it and how to communicate quantitative analysis. And if you are challenged with statistics as I am, you're grateful for those kinds of resources. Some of you probably work with numbers a lot, and that might be a resource that you can go to and get some really good ideas. 2 places to get slides. iStock Photo, you pay a small fee per slide. These are photos done by professionals, and you can buy them in units, and you pay by the size of the slide, small, medium, large, and so forth. And you can just download them and use them. Morguefile is one of the free spots. Most of these slides will be done by amateurs, but they're very good. And they've got a really great search engine. You can put in keywords and find pretty much what you want. So some of the photos that you see here are from iStock Photo, and some are from Morguefiles. So those are some of the ways that you can build your presentation. Think visually, think like a filmmaker rather than a novel writer, but tell your story, like a novel writer, and show us your story. So that's pretty much it. And now I'd like to take questions and see if we can go from there. Steve?
Just a comment on photos. Also, if you go to Flickr and you find objects that are, or pictures that are covered under Creative Commons,
Oh, right.
you can get a huge number of photos, especially if it's a place where, if you need pictures of a place where generally a lot of people go,
Yeah.
you could get images from just about every angle of popular sites, as well as just about any time of year and any time of day.
Oh, that's great. So is the site under Creative Commons, or?
The images will say on them how someone will allow it to be used. So if you search it, I got that information from Joe Clark in Library Media.
Yeah. And Joe's another good resource, too, to talk to about visual elements, too. Yeah. Any other ideas or questions, comments here? How many of you are doing presentations in the course of your work? All right, good. And what kind of information are you dealing with, for the most part? Textual, numerical?
We deal with textual and
Yeah.
love charts. Our problem is that it's not a problem, but our PowerPoints have a template
Yeah.
because we want to be consistent depending on who's presenting. So it's sometimes a little hard to work with that and be creative at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And is the template for UMBC?
The Hilltop Institute.
Oh, okay.
So we have our own kind of, we have our logo and whatnot.
Yeah. Does the logo have to be on every slide?
It is, yes. That's how we've branded it. So
Okay.
it's, like I said, it's a little hard to be creative in that sense.
Yeah. So that's really a procedural or policy kind of thing. Yeah.
I think we can do some things to it.
Yeah, we can definitely. make them a little bit more interesting, I think, with photos.
Yeah, and you don't have to have the logo on every slide. I mean, we know
Right.
the first time where you're from.
So do you have any suggestions for, say, you know, if we're presenting at a conference where we are given a conference template where we absolutely can't change it?
Yeah.
What are some techniques we could use there?
I would just go as simple as you can, just as simple as you can. If you were at Mazur's lecture the other night, he had very few slides, but they were effective. But the thing is, our attention was on him, you know, and the slides were a compliment. And there's kind of two ways of looking at this. The way I've done it today is the way that Gar Reynolds and Nancy Duarte do it. They create a story. They don't fill up the slides with a lot of text. They use the images as a kind of visual hook to hang the ideas that the narrator is presenting, you know. So if you're at a conference, you want people paying attention to you. The slides behind you then are complementing what you're saying, but they shouldn't be in competition with you, you know. So the simpler, the better. Now, I was reviewing a package the other day from McGraw-Hill, and this is for an online course, and it would be used with international students. It was a course in management leadership, and at one point I was looking at the screen and I was seeing images and text that were unrelated as far as I could tell, and I was also hearing on the audio something other than what I was reading on the text. Now that is absolutely the worst combination for learning that you could imagine. Because if you're reading something on the screen and I'm saying something different and you're seeing visual images, there's competition big time there, you know. What do you give your attention to? So I wrote back to the person considering it and said, this is not effective communication, you know. The content is good, but it's coming to us from three ways and they're all fighting each other. You know, that's why simplicity, not, you know, you're not reducing it, not dumbing it down, you're just making it easier for us to grasp what's really essential. Yes, please.
I don't think, maybe, you can't do this when you're going to a conference, but I work at UMBC and we got a new person in our department and she changed the template. And I don't know if she was supposed to do it. But the thing that's interesting from what you're saying is that her template was more, would provide for this type of, what you're talking about, much better than the one we used before.
Oh,
And the reason is because it was created for that, because she is actually doing the same thing you do with she's very much into the visual.
yes.
So if people would design it based on, rather than based on the marketing, because that's usually what it's for,
Yes.
and design it for actually the communication part that you're trying to convey, it would really make a huge difference.
Yeah.
And she got everything on it that we wanted, but she did it in such a way that it was complementary to the message rather than taking away from it.
Yeah, and we can't afford to have competition on the screen there. It's difficult enough for us to take in everything that's coming at us and sort it out. But the advantage, of course, with visuals over text is that we process it so fast and we grasp it all at once. Whereas with text, no matter how we get it, we're still sorting it out, and there's this interior dialogue even when we're reading. Oh, I don't agree with that, or what does he mean by that? You know, and so there's this constant kind of chatter going on. But with images, boom, we've got them just like that. So the simpler, the better, it seems to me. Any other ideas or comments here, or experiences you've had with presentations? Yes.
What if the content that you're trying to get across doesn't really lend itself to images that sort of complement them or complement the images or summarize them, where they're almost, if you do put an image, it's almost unrelated or generic or not effective? What do you do in?
Yeah. So if I have an image up there that is not consonant with the text or what I'm saying, then yeah, that's competition. And you know, these are not rules, they're just guidelines. Sometimes if you have an image that is a little unusual, it triggers associations and thoughts that people might not otherwise have that could really help make the lesson for you. I tried to choose images with care, but that's my perception of the message I'm giving. And it might be that people are seeing other things than what I intend, of course, you know. That's very much the case. But you try to, you know, create a complementary image to the text, whether what you're saying or what they're reading on the screen. Yes, please.
You said that you mostly, I don't know if you mostly use images from these two websites, or you use your own images and images from these websites. How you make your puzzle of words and your ideas and pictures? I guess first should be, of course, ideas and words, and then you are looking for some appropriate pictures.
Oh.
But sometimes you can't find appropriate ones, and you need to adjust to what you already see on this website. How do you deal with this?
Yeah. So the question is, do you find slides that go with what you want, or do you create something that goes with the slide?
I guess it's
Right?
the process is both sides, but both ways.
Yeah. Now generally, what you'd want to do is you start with your idea and you're trying to illustrate or complement the idea. But now and then you might find a slide that is just so fine that you want it in there, and you're going to try and wrench your presentation around so that you can include that. That's kind of risky sometimes, you know. But it's true that it is the case that, like I said earlier, sometimes image gives rise to thought. For some people, the thought gives rise to the image. And I'll be going through photographs looking for something, no. It's just not quite right. And then finally, there's something. That could work. Then you put it on the screen, and now you have to figure out where will you put the text if you're going to use text at all. And that's where balance and those kinds of things come in. Some images are so overwhelming that anything that you might say in text or verbal would just be lost, you know. So again, generally I would start with the idea I want to get across and find a photo that would work with that. And some of the photos in here I took myself, and some I got from these other places. It's a lot easier these days, you know. We can take photos with our phones even. And some of the slides you saw there were just iPhone. I just shot in my office there. Do you have a...
Where was your son?
Where was he?
Where was the picture taken?
Down at the Smithsonian, behind the castle in the garden there. And just a beautiful place. He didn't know I was taking the picture, which is the best thing, of course. That's my wife. Another iPhone shot. So, yes.
I was going to ask, do you know of any other presentation tools that are good to use other than PowerPoint? I mean, something that maybe are
Yeah.
free.
There's a program, and Steve, you may know about this, called View. And it's from Tufts University. And if you go to their website, you can find it. It's free, and you can use it for concept mapping. And you can also make charts with it, but it's very creative. It's not sort of locked in. I mean, if you go to the library and talk to Mei Chang, she and her staff have done some things with View that are really exciting in terms of some of their collections in their archives. You click on a square, and it drills down and takes you to a collection of photographs and opens up a video and all this kind of thing. So if you just want to use it very simply, View provides you a way to create a kind of flow chart, you know, or a concept map, or just try some brainstorming right there. That's wonderful, and you can bring them in as JPEGs. I noticed if you bring them in, you create a flow chart and you save it as a PDF. When you bring it in, it doesn't quite work. If you have a background, sometimes the elements on the screen will pop off that background. But JPEG seems to work really well. So that's another example of software that you can use. And I'm sure there are many others. I've not tried to embed video in a presentation, but that can be done too. And PowerPoint and Keynote make that very easy, as well as putting a kind of musical bed in there too. And you can automate these shows as well. Any other ideas or questions? Yes, please.
Did you say that you were going to have another class about numbers, quantitative data? Because that can be incredibly dry and
Yeah.
doesn't lend to a lot of maybe pictures, more graphs and charts. But
Yeah.
so are you going to do something?
I'm going to try that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a challenge, you know.
It is, yeah.
And you know, you don't want to do the information wrong in an effort to be creative, you know. So we're going to keep the emphasis on conveying the information, but as clearly as possible, without you know. I mean, it's so easy when you've got bar charts, for example, and you're sitting in a room like this, and you're in the back of the room, and you just see shapes, and the text is lost. It means nothing, you know. So you have a grid in the background. We can't read it, really, you know. That's why you can pull out the things you want to emphasize and just scale the rest of it back. And that's where your narration, your presentation would be so important, drawing attention to just the numbers that you want. Really, when we're looking at charts and graphs, we're looking at shapes that we can grasp quickly. The details are lost on us, and they're almost a distraction. And so we pull out the details that we think are important to convey the information we want to get across. That's a basic principle, you know. So I'll try to make it interesting. Yes?
I work with students who, and as part of their senior project, they have to do a 10-minute presentation on their large research project that they've done.
Oh, yeah.
And I've sat through some painful ones. And some of them just put so much text, and they have so many slides, they can't even get through it in 10 minutes, and you just want to tell them all about the Simplify. Are there any sites that you recommend that I could just direct them to on these simple guidelines of how to do it for their audience, or just versus me writing up something? I mean, is there something that you would recommend?
Yeah, there are. Again, I go back to Gar Reynolds. His website, presentationzen.com, just the full word, presentationzen.com. Very helpful. And Nancy Duarte has one that is Slideology, all one word, slideology.com. And she's got lots of tips and examples there. Another place to go is slideshare.com. And people put up their presentations there, and they get critiques and so forth. You can see just hundreds and hundreds of shows. They're mostly about business, so you get some good ideas about communicating effectively there. And you can put your own work up there too, and let people see it. But you'll see the good, the bad, and the ugly there, you know. But what everyone does is to be careful about the text, just not pile it up.
Yeah, it's almost like they're just standing there and reading their own slide. And, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you also recommend a certain number of slides for a certain minute presentation? Like when you started by saying, I don't know, you said you had 95 slides. I thought,
Yeah.
oh my gosh.
Everyone went, oh.
Yeah. Like how is that possible? But do you
Yeah.
have any recommended number?
No, it depends on what you want to get across. But a really fascinating social phenomenon is called Pecha Kucha, something I developed in Japan, and it's clubs where people go to give presentations, and they've got 6 minutes and 40 seconds to do it, and you know, you automate it so that when the slides are done, you sit down. It's something like 20 slides, 20 seconds each. It works out to 6 minutes and 40 seconds. And then you sit down and someone else gets up. There are other things like no more than 7 lines of text on a slide, no more than 7 words in a line, no more than 7 bullet points. You don't need any bullet points, really. But you'll come across these rules, you know. And again, they're not, I would not want to call them rules. They're guidelines. But in general, the less text on the screen, the better. That's the guideline that I try to follow. And what you don't need is, to me, be standing here and saying, oh, this is a good example, you know, of something you might see in a presentation. Manifestation, noun, an event, action, or object that clearly shows or embodies. I mean, you can't read that, and you don't need me to tell you that. So, yeah, Steve.
What about live interaction with the slide, electronic notation? When's that appropriate? How can you use that effectively?
Yeah.
I know that's a whole other big topic.
I mean, like you're actually writing.
Exactly.
Over.
Or even highlighting or
Yeah.
whatever.
Again, the emphasis is not on the technology and the toys, but on the communication. And if it aids your communication, go for it. If it doesn't, it's just another distraction, I think. Yeah.
In my department, we have to do a lot of movement between slides and being online, doing something, showing them something on a website, in a database.
Oh,
Or
you're
something
going
like
from
that.
slides to websites? Things?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you know of any way to do that really smoothly? Because it can be a little confusing for the presenter and the
Oh,
viewer, I think.
to be switching from a slide
Yeah,
and then go to a website that's
and then
embedded.
go back to your
Yeah.
slide.
I've not done that, so I don't have any experience on that, and I've not actually seen it, but if anyone else here has that kind of experience, please speak up.
I don't know if this would help, but something I've used for presentation that I like, and it's smooth, and I've done it for a live audience, is blogs. And so you're not using blog as it's supposed to be used. What you're doing is you're embedding creating each of those, like a blog, what do you call it when you want to put your stuff up there? You know, you know how it makes a
Entry.
menu on the left?
Yeah.
Yeah, you post, I build it backwards, so that because I don't know how to, at least the one I use, you can't change the menu. So you build it backwards, you want the first thing, you know, at the top, so forth. But, so what you can do is embed things that like if you have a video, so you can just go down, you can say, so here's your first, or you can click on the left for your menu, and some things can be embedded. And so it's a different way, and it's kind of fun, and, but it might not work for you, because if you're going back and forth, although you can embed things, so that might work.
Yeah.
And you could use that if you, like, say you're doing a conference on a webinar or something like that, you could use it in that way too, and show just the blog part, and then keep going down, and then click on your left to go somewhere, or just go down the page and have it there, or a link or something. I don't know if that would help, but anyway, it's a really fun way to do it. It's a little more creative than, not necessarily more creative, but it's different, and it's fun to try and do something.
Yeah, and for a long time, you know, I've wanted a way to jump into a scene in a film and just find that scene, you know, and it might not be under the chapter heading on a DVD, but you still got to click all the way through that menu, you know. And of course, I've not found a way legally to yank one out of a DVD and just drop that in, but it would be so nice to just say, for example, you know, and there it is. There's the scene in its entirety, you know. Wes?
I was going to say another possibility is there's a package called Slidy, SLIDY, which is done by the W3C to do slides in HTML. So
Oh,
it's a
that's good.
slide kind of presentation in your web browser.
Okay.
So you
Called
can
Slidy?
SLIDY. I think if you Google just Slidy, it should be the first link.
Is it free?
It's free, yeah. It's just a set of style sheets in HTML. And then so you build your slides with that, so you can easily link to websites, and everything would then be in the browser.
Okay, that's what I heard. Thank you.
Wow, that's good. And so the transitions are quick and smooth.
Right, yeah. And
Yeah.
if, if you have a tab browser like Firefox, you can just click it into different tabs.
That's nice. Yeah, Jill?
I have two questions, Barry. One has to do with when you do a presentation, very often the information you're sharing people want.
Yeah,
So that the information's not on your slides at this point, it's in your notes.
yeah.
Do you make that available? Like if you go to a conference, then you just make your slides available with your notes? Do you see what I'm saying? Because a lot of
Yeah.
times when you go, they want the text information, even if it's not on your slide.
I'll show you what can be done in that regard. Here's pretty much the text of what I was saying, And so I can print it out this way, and when I put it up on SlideShare, because that person is just interacting with the slides, any information they're going to get is going to come from the slide. So I can put it up in this way. Now when we're doing it here, I'm narrating, and so you're paying attention to the slides only, but a lot of different ways. And this comes through the printing function. When you go to print, then you can choose handouts, slides with notes, all that kind of stuff. It's really quite helpful that way.
And then my second question is a lot of the things people are talking about here, you embed them into your presentation and you go to do your presentation and you go to test it and it doesn't work in your room that you're assigned to because it doesn't have internet access and it's the only one that doesn't of all the presentation room. So it sounds to me like what you're really doing here is minimizing that as an option. So you're embedding less and less and trying to make your visuals more in the presentation and not pulling from outside sources.
That's right.
To sort of prevent that
Yeah.
okay,
I'm scaling back on the reliance on technology
yeah.
because it's a bit flaky, Steve?
Sometimes what people will do if they're going to go to links like that is at least do screenshots or cache it in a web browser. So if you go to the sites ahead of time and you set them up as tabs and you visit every single link that you were going to do on there, then even when you get to that place and there's no internet, it's already in the cache. So you just start at the right spot and everywhere that you go, you've already got it.
Got it.
Is there some way to download those in order? So
you
that
could
create-
do screen captures
Yeah.
as if you're actually on the web, so that you could do the screen capture of that website that you're going to,
Oh,
and
okay.
then next link you go to, do that, save all those images, and then input them into PowerPoint or whatever, and then when you advance the next slide, it looks like you went to the link.
Oh,
Because
right.
you knew where you were going to go anyway.
Yeah.
You just need generally you just need the image that's on the page, but for interactive sites, unless you can download the interactive portion, you have to go to that site.
Yeah. So a screenshot, put it in, make a slide out of it,
Yeah.
essentially. Yeah. That's a good way. Yeah. And then, of course, in the handout, you could include links which you could send. That you could send the whole thing electronically, and those links would be live, and people could go to them if they wished. Yeah.
I feel like jumping over some resources.
Yes, please. Thank you, Paul. I was hoping you'd emerge from the cave.
That's a great idea, Steve. I like that, about doing screenshots. I would do that. Because the other thing, when I give presentations, I'm Paul, by the way, where I work in new media. When I do presentations, I always have backups of any kind of media I might present. I'll have it in various forms. I'll have it up on the web somewhere. I'll have it locally on a disk. I'll have it locally on a flash drive. I'll have it locally I'll have like 3 or 4 backups for where I can find that material. We talked about how to show your students, how to give them this presentation or give them this info. Another way would be go to, this is going to be online. So you'll be able to go to umbc.edu/my. And in a few days,
MOD?
we're opening this online, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Are we?
fine. Yeah.
So it's just MOD, just the /MOD after the UMBC, and we'll have this up, and you can point your students to that link. and they can watch it in 3 different ways.
And you also have it on YouTube, is that true?
Well, if you go to that, you'll see 3 versions. One will be YouTube, and the other will be iTunes, and the other will be our streaming servers. They have options
Oh, yeah.
of what to do. You asked about if you ever wanted to link to something, a specific spot in a YouTube video. You can do that. It's called deep linking. And let's say there's one spot on YouTube video you want your students to see, and it's 10 minutes and 10 minutes and 6 seconds in. There's a way, if you look up, you can either email me or we have it, just you look up deep linking YouTube. It's a very simple formula that you add. I don't have it memorized, but it pretty much at the end of a YouTube link, you know, it'll have a number, and then don't quote me on this, but it's pretty much like a pound sign equals, and then you do minutes and seconds. And don't quote me; it's exactly that way.
So you
I
would
have it
say,
memorized.
you would say like 10 minutes, 14
Something
seconds.
like that, but it's able to do it. If you look up deep linking, Google deep linking a YouTube video, it'll give you those directions. You'll see somebody's posted the directions of how to do it. It's really useful. And then other tools for presentations, instead of just always using PowerPoint to make your slides kind of thing, you can make your slides in Photoshop if you want to. You can add text and really have much more manipulation of the images
Yeah.
in Photoshop. There are also easy ways to make videos of those slides in like Photo Story, as I understand, is a Windows program. You can make a video. The whole thing could be a video, an iMovie, Windows
Yeah, that's
Movie
true.
Maker, which allows you to add text to those images. And we often think about Movie Maker, iMovie is like has to be moving. It could really all be still images, but you're adding some movement to them. You're actually adding some nice movement to them of them sliding off or some transitions that might make it look more professional, more engaging.
Oh, Paul, here's where we can do a commercial for digital storytelling,
Yeah,
right? These guys are going to do another workshop in January.
which may be full. There
Right.
may be a waiting list.
Okay, well, it's digital storytelling, which is a high art here at UMBC, and it's wonderful. I took it back in May. It's a 3-day kind of boot camp, and what I did was to create slides in Keynote and then put them into Final Cut Pro, which makes a little movie out of them, and you get dissolves and you got music and voiceovers and all that kind of thing. So it takes a bit of lifting in the front when you're learning, but after that, then you can create something that you can hand off and it can run itself.
Right, and those digital story movies that we make, sometimes I've used them in presentations that I'll just open up with that as an attention grabber at the beginning of the presentation, or it might have some content that I need to present, and then it's another way of presenting content. It's not just a slide, it's a moving image, it's got narration, it's got music. It's going to be very engaging for your students.
Yeah. What else do you have for us?
That's basic. The other thing, when I give a presentation, you said how do you switch between things? I just usually just keep different windows open. You know, if I was going back to a website, although I love Steve's idea.